As we all know, Leeds United are currently on the hunt for a number 10, someone that is a creative midfielder that is able to stitch together the midfield and the front line to ultimately provide more and more chances to score and maybe even score a few goals themselves. However, the number 10 hunt seems to have gotten a little bit more detailed, with the club having to make a very, very big decision between two very significant options, one of which lies on one end of the spectrum for a few different things, the other lies on the opposite end of the spectrum, and if the club don't make the right decision, things could go very much the wrong direction. So stick around and find out who those two different options are, what they sort of represent in terms of club strategy, and the one that I personally believe is the better option. But before I do, just subscribe to the channel, be massively appreciated. It's one button down here, and about 50% of you aren't, and that's quite sad. Anyway, let's get into it. So, to begin with, first of all, we had a little bit of an update on the Julian Brandt chase that Leeds United seem to be engaging in, with Nicola Shearer, who isn't always the most accurate of journalists, but when he sort of says something with a level of certainty, it tends to be true. Giving a little bit more information on what Leeds United offered Julian Brandt when Jurgen Brandt, Julian Brandt's dad, visited Thorpe Arch last week. Specifically, he says, Leeds interested in signing Brandt as a free agent, that bit we knew. Leeds have offered him a contract until 2029, that being a 3-year contract, so that will run until Brandt is the age of 33, I believe. I think he's still 30, at least. I'd be a little bit confused if he isn't, but let's just sort of make sure, shall we? Just to make sure I'm not going to look an absolute twat. No, he's 32. No, 30. What? Yeah, 30. He'll be 33. Sorry. Look, it's like 1:15. I've just finished work. Let me have it. So, going forward, Julian Brandt is one of the sort of major options, and he sort of represents what we did last season, which was tried and true talent. Try and sign them for relatively cheap fees but more expensive wages. It balances out financially, but it makes sure that high quality players are coming to Leeds United and ultimately making their impact here, as opposed to making said impact elsewhere, in the case of Julian Brandt at a Betis or Atletico or something along those lines. But then, yesterday, we found out a little bit more about who the alternative to Julian Brandt is, and that made things very, very interesting, because the alternative is Czech footballer, that's his name, Pavel Schulz. Now, I was trying to remember how you pronounce the surname. We went through it on stream yesterday, which took a little bit of time, but we got there in the end. Pavel Schulz currently plays for Lyon. And fact of the matter is, Lyon aren't in the best position financially. He joined Lyon at the start of last season for €7.5 million. Wasn't the most constant of players. He had 27 appearances, 17 starts, but his sort of goal scoring return was fantastic. Double digits in terms of goals scored, 3 assists, which wasn't huge, but he still created plenty of opportunities for Lyon in the time that he was on the pitch, which was less time than he will have necessarily wanted to have spent there. This is a pretty significant alternative to what Julian Brandt provides, because Schulz is a significantly younger player. He's 25 years of age, would cost a fairly hefty transfer fee because Lyon aren't going to let him go super cheap. The specific sums that have been bandied around are along the lines of €25 million, which is a fairly vast profit for Lyon. Let's be honest here. They signed him for 7.5 million, and we know that they're still in financial trouble. The only reason we picked up Lucas Perry was because Perry was going cheap. That financial trouble has lasted since last year, and they're trying to turn it around by swapping some players out for a little bit of profit, which means that €7.5 million Pavel Schulz is potentially on the way out for about €25 million, which is great business for them, slightly expensive business for us, but it's a position where we could really do with a number 10, so it's a move that we're potentially going to make. But at the same time, his wages are going to be significantly lower than what you'd expect for Julian Brandt. Julian Brandt has a significant sort of CV behind him of playing at the top level. That means that he would probably demand one of the higher levels of wages that anyone gets paid in our squad, which is pretty vast. There's rumours of Harry Wilson being on about 120 grand a week, which is big, let's be honest here. Whereas on the other hand, you look at Pavel Schulz, he is reportedly on €52,500 a week, which is significantly lower than what you would need to pay Julian Brandt to come to Leeds United. Plus, a little bit less competition, plus you've not got the sort of prestige and pedigree pushing that higher and higher and higher. At the end of the day, Schulz in the long term would be more affordable week to week, but you have to pay him an initial transfer fee. That's got to go to Lyon because they're trying to fix their financial issues. And then you got the question of which of those options is going to be better for Leeds. And I don't like having to be a fence sitter, right? And in this conversation specifically, I'm not going to be, because there is one of those two players that I'm going to lean towards. But in terms of the two strategies that Leeds United are looking at, the sort of older veteran people that are affordable in terms of fees, more expensive in terms of wages, and the younger player that you spend more in terms of fees on, but you'll likely flip that player for a profit going forward. I think both of those strategies are equally valid, and we need both of those at the same time, because if you don't, then you have either an ageing squad that gets a little bit too old, that loses its sort of physical abilities over time, so like a 33-year-old Julian Brandt isn't necessarily going to be doing brilliantly, or you have a team of inexperienced players that don't really have that mindset that they need to get through the tougher moments. Perfect example of this, I would argue, was the playoff final a few years ago, where it was a very, very young Leeds United side. If you have a look at the fact that we had Archie Gray on the pitch, Rutter was a key player, Somerville was a key player, Melier was our goalkeeper, all fairly young footballers at the time. And they didn't have that mindset that they needed to get through the trickier moments. That fine balance is what we need. So in my opinion, the player that we need in this position is probably going to be Pavel Schulz, because Schulz is, at the end of the day, that sort of young, upcoming, promising talent. And yeah, he's played a decent amount of football. He's 25. He's not like 18. But he's still sort of got that youth and vigour and potential to grow that Brandt doesn't. Which means that with Wilson coming in, also at the age of around 30, you're not putting all of your attacking emphasis on older players that could potentially start losing those physical attributes. In the event that Harry Wilson starts sort of dropping off in terms of his ability to do output, then having Schulz in place, that is someone that is able to go a little bit more energetically, a little bit more box to box, that presses quite high, is going to be beneficial. If you've only got Brandt as your alternative option, then if Brandt has the same sort of physical fall off, you're in deep, deep trouble. For me, what we've learned is that interest in Schulz means that it's not just a case of leaning towards Julian Brandt, but we've got alternatives. We have a list again, which is good, and ultimately I hope that we land on SULC on that list as opposed to Julian Brandt, because that is, for me, the more sustainable route forward in terms of squad building. But as always, that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Sorry, this is ending very, very quickly. You might have noticed about 15-30 seconds ago, this eye started twitching because I got a really bad headache that just kicked in. So I'm going to end this fairly sharpish. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you later. Toodaloo, me amigos. Where's my mouse? There it is. Ta-ra.